On today's show, we'll be joined by weekly co-host Alykhan Bijani to discuss some of the Rockets' offensive philosophy. Stephen Silas mentions quite often getting back to the Rockets' drive and kick offense, right? That is what at the core of what the Rockets are trying to accomplish offensively. So how do the Rockets get to their drive and kick offense, right? How do we break down what the drive and kick offense should look like at its best? Had the chance to ask Stephen Silas about that while we were in Dallas for the Rockets-Dallas Mavericks game. We're going to break down that as well as some of these split-cut actions that the Rockets can run to open things up offensively for Alperen, Sengun, Jabari Smith Jr., and more. All of that coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help the show out tremendously by commenting anything below. Remember, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Go comment on the show, helps out a ton. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Joining us now is your weekly co-host, of course, none other than Alykhan Bijani. You can follow on Twitter while it still exists at Rockets_Insider. And we've got a loaded show for you here today ahead of the Rockets-Mavericks game. I got a chance to ask Stephen Silas a little bit about kind of some of his offensive philosophy and how the Rockets achieve the things that they want to do offensively. We're going to run that clip back for you. We're also going to focus in segment 3 on split-cut actions that the Rockets can run to open some things up for themselves offensively. And we will, of course, be running our fancy new telestration tool during that segment as we discuss the split-cut actions. Alykhan, you ready to dive into what Stephen Silas discussed about his offensive philosophy?
Yeah, man, we're back in the frozen tundra of Houston, Texas. Both of us were out of town. You were in Dallas. I was Mr. Worldwide. So now we're back, and we'll discuss some Stephen Silas comments.
Can I call you Mr. 305? Is that
again?
I love 305 is Miami, but
well, you know, I love Miami, so
that's fair. All right, we're gonna call you Mr. Worldwide, Mr. 305. If I was a better producer, I would have like a Mr. 305 graphic like teed up in the background, but alas, I do not. So
Dale. That's what he says. Right? He says Dale. He says Dale.
Okay. Oh, I'm so proud of you. All right, Dale, let's go. We're gonna dive straight into the Stephen Silas clip and trying to get a better understanding of what the Rockets offense is supposed to look like when it's at its best.
You've spoken about offensively when things kind of stagnate, needing to get back to the drive and kick game. Yeah. How do you do that? Is it about just an individual thing, guys recognizing when to drive, when to kick, when to make reads, or is it more about taking advantage early in the shot clock? How do you get back to that?
Yeah, so there's a few things. There's getting the ball up the floor quickly so they're attacking mismatches, and then if you can get the ball moved from one side to the other, now you're playing against closeouts, and that's the whole thing when it comes to drive and kick is creating closeout situations where somebody's running at you, you either have your shot or you initiate drive and kick. So anytime we can pass ahead and now have someone closing out to us, now we get to our drive and kick, or if we can get the ball moving as a result of a pick and roll where the roll comes, they have to tag the roller. Now we move it, now there's the closeout and we're attacking that closeout. So figuring out ways to attack closeouts, that's the way that you initiate drive and kick.
When the guys are moving the ball side to side and trying to get those closeout opportunities to happen, do you think they're kind of acting on them quick enough to get to them, or do you think there's times where they maybe are a second late on the pass and it kind of, the window kind of closes?
You have to be on time with it for sure. Your shot, drive, decision has to be quick. You can't hold it or have any indecision when it comes to it because like you're saying, your window is closed. So we work on it, and it's a work in progress for sure. But the more we do it, as we did it in Toronto, and we had all the assists and the ball was moving, the better it is for our group.
Shout out to Steven, because I feel like when you ask him a solid like X's and O's question about like his philosophy about the game or what they're trying to accomplish, I feel like his answers are always really informative. And I've been probably one of the loudest critics so far this season about just where's the offensive identity, what are they trying to do, and hearing him kind of break down and explain, well, because we hear him say it a lot, like we need to get back to our driving kick or driving kick. And so I just had that light bulb moment where I was like, well, like, okay, how do you get back to the driving kick? And I feel actually a little bit more confident and like comfortable in what the Rockets are trying to achieve offensively, hearing him kind of break it down the way that he did just now.
Yeah, man. Shout out to you, Jackson. I mean, that was a great question, great follow-up as well. So, you know, like you said, Steven Silas loves to give great insight.
Hey, well, I learned from the best. So,
oh man, nah, man. I'm glad you're there to ask him those questions. Now, you know, I want to bring up. I mean, he talked about a lot of things, Jackson. There's a few things. I guess let's start off with that first question you asked him and go from there. The key thing he talked about was attacking closeouts. And that goes back to something that you and I have talked about on numerous occasions on the show, where is the Rockets offense is predicated on putting two on the ball. And what we mean by that is you're trying to draw a situation where two defenders are on one offensive player, right, with the ball. And in this case, if you're attacking a closeout, then you beat that initial defender, and then another defender has to slide over and help, which in that case is that two on the ball, right? So this is a visual for our listeners to be able to understand what Steven Silas is talking about. This is still the same thing that he's referred to in his first few seasons here, by kind of basically playing a 2-on-1 on offense. Now, the thing I want to be able to bring up also is attacking closeouts. When do you attack them, Jackson? And when do you shoot the ball? I think there are times where the young players on this team get the ball because they have not touched it, and they just jack up a shot. When they could have just taken a step or two inside, not take the shot, take a step or two inside, see if they're drawing a defender and being able to pass it back out. I think right now, the way the scouting report is and the way defenses are playing against them, teams know which players are going to shoot the ball and which players are going to drive. And I think that's where this whole closeout thing, ideally it's going to work, but you have to be able to diversify that, right? You have to be able to move, right? If you move a little bit before you get the ball in the catch, then the defense is a little bit out of position. So then you can make a choice of whether you're driving or whether you're shooting. If you're in the slot like EG and you have a ton of space, of course EG is going to shoot that ball. That's where he's at his best. But if like EG does, you can watch him during games. EG will also move a little bit. He'll kind of inch a few feet this way or a few feet that way. What that does is, depending on what the defender does in their closeout, he can attack it or he can shoot the ball. And I think that's a lesson that a lot of other players can learn too. Jabari Smith, Tari Eason, KJ. I think KJ is probably the best of those three right now in terms of cutting without the basketball, right? Whenever he sees players going against him. And KJ is really good at taking just one or two steps he needs from the near side corner and getting up for a dunk. And so when I think about when he says attacking closeouts, it's not just about attacking closeouts and kind of putting the defense in scramble mode, which is great, but it's attacking closeouts with a purpose. You can't just attack a closeout because you don't know what you're supposed to be doing. You have to be able to make the read. What is your defender doing? Is he helping on the nail? Is he helping kind of deter on the pick and roll? Is he kind of cheating in and you get the pass in the corner? Are you going to shoot the ball? Or are you going to drive it? You have to be able to make that read quick. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where if you're going to attack closeouts, but do it in a quicker fashion.
Absolutely. No, I do think there's so many times where it feels like the Rockets, they maybe do get up the court and they're kind of getting into their initial action or whatever. And you'll see, Jalen coming, curling off a screen or something, on the weak side, top of the key with the ball, off on the other wing. And there's maybe a delay and that's what prompted the question, right? Is maybe there's a split second delay in getting the ball to Jalen to where he can catch the ball, curling off the screen and get going downhill with the defender like on his hip, or Jalen catches the ball and maybe he's just not as decisive as he needs to be, deciding, okay, I'm going to attack or I'm going to pull up or I'm going to use another screen and get around going, to the opposite side of the floor. And it's that decision-making process that we've seen times where it looks really good, where the young players are making the right decisions. They're making quick, smart decisions. And that's when the Rockets offense really looks like it's humming, when things are flowing. And then there's times where it looks a little disjointed, right? Where things are falling apart and it's kind of devolving into that heavy isolation play. And I think those are the moments where you're like, okay, they missed their window, right? They missed their opportunity. We want to, coming up, I want to focus, or we want to focus, I should say, a little bit more on the second half of Stephen Silas's answer as it regards to how the Rockets kind of get back into their driving kick, how they attack opposing defenses, and how they unlock what they want to do offensively. We're going to get there, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Masterclass. With Masterclass, you can learn from the world's best minds anytime, anywhere, and at your own pace. You can learn how to cook from Gordon Ramsay. You can improve your business strategy skills from Bob Iger. You can learn songwriting even from John Legend. With over 180 classes from a range of world-class instructors, that thing that you've always wanted to do or learn how to do is closer than you think. Masterclass is accessible on your phone, web, or smart TV, offering classes on a wide variety of topics, all taught by world-class instructors at the top of their respective fields. Each class is broken out into individual video lessons, usually about 10 minutes long, give or take. Members can explore at their own pace, and each class is supported by downloadable materials, class guides, recipes, and more. You can find all the available classes at masterclass.com. This holiday, give one annual membership and get one. Go to masterclass.com/lockedon today. That's masterclass.com/lockedon today. Terms apply. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, appreciate you for making LOR your first listen. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with the local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, Alykhan, in the second part of Steven's, kind of answer discussing how to get back into the driving kick, and he talked about the windows closing, right? And I alluded to it there a little bit, is I feel like that, to me, is kind of the issue oftentimes with this Rockets offense, because one, it does feel like they're a young team, right? It doesn't feel like they get out in transition nearly enough for a young team. And some of that is the decision making, right? Maybe they get a good defensive stop, and then for whatever reason, Jalen or Kevin or even Eric, they decide they're going to walk the ball up instead of really pushing the pace in transition. Some of that falls on the big, who maybe gets the defensive rebound and isn't looking for the outlet to kick things ahead and to jumpstart, to ignite the fast break. So that's kind of domino number one as to how the Rockets find themselves sometimes having to deal with, more of a slowed down half-court offense than they would like to, rather than the, run and gun, fast-paced transition game that they would like to thrive in. But then you look at, when they do slow things down and get in the half court, it's that decision making in the half court, right? It's the identification.
It's not just the ball handler. It's not just the ball handler in this case.
Yeah, it can be any number of the guys on the floor, whether it's the recognition, of the big coming to set the screen, whether it's, getting just the recognition of all five guys and understanding where they need to be on the floor. We see that time and time again is sometimes guys are just maybe unaware isn't the right word, but just there is a bit of a delay, right, in getting things set up, guys understanding where they need to be for spacing purposes, all that kind of stuff. And all of that kind of snowballs into some bad offense sometimes when guys aren't recognizing what's going on the floor.
Yeah. He said something that was interesting. They're going through growing pains and we're trying to get better and they're young and all these things. And those sound like excuses, but honestly, I have to agree with him. I mean, they do make some really young team mistakes. And a lot of it has to do with not the fact that they're not a lack of effort in terms of trying to score or try to get into the offense. It has to do with just recognition, making reads. And that's something that you just get through playing time. I give you an example with Jabari Smith. Jabari, so far early on in the season, a lot of people have been complaining that all he does is pick and pop and you kind of stand there and shoot threes. But Jackson, I'll be very honest with you. There are possessions where teams are playing off of him, which is great, right? Like you want him to shoot an open shot. But if they're playing that off of him, he can just cut. Especially because if you're shooting a pick and pop three, he's at the top of the key. But there's times where he's at the slot. And it is the role of the person in the slot in the Rockets offense to cut, to slash, to be a safety valve for Alp or whoever is driving.
It's also worth noting, just for for all of our listeners, just a quick refresher, right? So when we say slot, when we say wing, corner, so imagine if you're looking at the court, right? You're staring at the basket. You've got top of the key, obviously, is, right in front of the basket. Like you're at the top of the 3-point line. From that spot, the wing is both spots directly to your left. It's kind of that kind of wide area as the 3-point line starts curving. The slot would be kind of the spot where the 3-point line breaks into that hard break where it starts, shifting towards the corner. And then the corners are obviously where you're all the way out in the 3-point line corner. So when we talk about, wing, slot, corner, you can envision where those spots are on the actual floor. The slot is by far the smallest spot, right? The wing is kind of this wide area, of the 3-point line. The corner is the entire corner spot. The slot is that very specific area in between the wing and the corner, and the Rockets are very intentional about putting guys in the slot and having guys attack from there.
Yeah, thank you, Jackson. I think that's a great way to kind of visualize what I'm talking about. And if for an extra visual for our listeners, think of where Eric Gordon likes to shoot those deep threes. Not the ones where he shoots at the wing a lot, but those deep wing threes, they're oftentimes from a straight line from the slot position. Okay. Now, when Jabari is there, though, right? He has a lot of open shots, but sometimes, like we talked about the last segment, defenders will cheat. They'll play off him and go to the nail. They'll kind of stunt towards a ball handler. Stunt meaning kind of lunging towards the ball handler, then trying to recover back into position to defend the off-ball player they were defending, right? So in those situations, Jabari has to make a read. Can he cut? And we saw examples of that in Dallas versus the Mavericks, where he did cut. And this is not just cutting within the half court. This is also cutting in transition. There are times where he's setting screens. Set a quick screen and pop. Set a quick screen and roll. Set a go screen. Try to do a wiper play, right? We talk about wiper all the time. What is wiper? Wiping off the defender, forcing a switch. Jabari can do those things. He's so agile for a guy of his size. Obviously, he needs to work on his ball handling, but he can move, and he can move really well. And if he can do that, he can open up so many more driving lanes and driving kick just by doing that. He doesn't need to have the ball in his hands to be able to do that. And I think that's just, I'm not picking on Jabari. I'm just giving an example of kind of what are some things the Rockets offense can do to support and reinforce and kind of supplement what the ball handlers already do, right? Look at Alp. I'll give Alp example. For me, Alp, and I will have to now include Usman Garuba in this, but those two to me are the fastest centers on this team. And what I mean by centers, I mean that when they're playing the 5 or they're playing the big role, they are darting down in transition. They're trying to get in position. And I have to respect that, because oftentimes their wings or their guards are behind them in transition. When they
I'll raise you one, Alykhan. You said they're the fastest centers on the team. One, they're the only two centers currently on the active on the roster besides Boban, and then Bruno's still out, right? So like you would hope that they're fast relative to their competition, because they're the two guys getting the main. I would argue they're two of the fastest players on this team, and I don't mean fast like speed, right? I don't mean fast like, because obviously Jalen is a blur, but fast as far as their in-game recognition, their ability to make decisions on the floor, right? Alp, right? We're constantly flabbergasted by some of the reads that he makes, because he just processes the game so quickly and makes those very quick. And sometimes he makes mistakes, right? He's not a perfect player. He'll have, a bad pass, bobble something, whatever. But he just makes his decisions so quickly in the moment. And Usman is the exact same way, right? Think about the play in Dallas, right? Where he had that bullet pass to KJ Martin on the roll. He was rolling to the rim. He got the pass, and he immediately recognized KJ was cutting in from the baseline, hit him with a beautiful bullet pass, and KJ goes up for the easy dunk because Dwight Powell had already committed to rotating over to Garuba. So it's that immediate recognition of what you're going to do the moment your hands touch the basketball, and even sometimes knowing what you're going to do before your hands even touch the basketball. Under kind of like 4D chess, right? Knowing like 2-3 moves ahead what your next step is going to be.
The Garuba play you highlighted, I want to go even further and talk about the before the pass. When he's setting the screen, right? Garuba's coming up. Go back and watch that play. Look at Garuba's eyes, where they're looking. He's recognizing where the low man is. He's looking where the help is. It's not just the ball handler's responsibility to know where the big is, where the drop is. I mean, where the big and drop defender is, or where the low man is. It's to recognize the whole defense, because when the big is there and they're setting the screen, they have to make sure they're not getting in the ball handler's path, and they're doing what they can to clear out a lane. It's not just about diving. You're clearing out a lane for your ball handler to be able to attack, right? Especially if they're going over the screen, which for Jalen, in those minutes you're talking about when that pass was made, they're going over those screens. right? They're forcing him to go inside, right? So in situations like that, you have to make sure that big and guard are an understanding of what the principles are offensively, making those reads and going from there. That is what it means to play in a read and react offense. And I have to commend Usman Garuba for doing an excellent job in the Dallas game of playing that role. He hit those 2 threes. Now, is he going to shoot like that all the time? Probably not. But those were a
How
smart
dare
play.
you besmirch the name of three-point sniper Usman Garuba? He is shooting 75% from behind the arc this season on 8 attempts. But it's
No, and just, I just wanted to give just commend really Usman for that. And then also KJ. And I mean, we talk about him every week. I feel like KJ is just playing it within his role. He's playing smart. He's making good, decisive cuts. And you know who I think the Rockets really miss to be able to play this way? I really do think they miss him a lot.
Jae'Sean Tate.
Jae'Sean Tate. What Jae'Sean does is, if you watch him and go back and watch even the few games he did play, he's pointing, he's cutting, he's moving, he's telling other players where to go. He's the leader of this team. So if he tells you, why are you on this side of the court? Go in the opposite, fill that corner, fill that slot. You go do it, because he knows what's supposed to be happening. He can recognize that. That's why he's so good whenever he's driving and he's trying to go up or he's trying to make a pass. That's why he's trying to get better as a passer. And he told us that he's trying to get better as a passer during the offseason, because he knows in this team, he's going to have that responsibility.
He's very much he is both an offensive and defensive connector for this team. I know there's some downsides to his game, and it remains to be seen if the improved 3-point shooting is true, and if he can start to build a reputation as a better 3-point shooter, as we've seen kind of KJ Martin do this season. Defenses are honoring KJ Martin as a 3-point shooter. They're closing out all hard on him, and that's opening up the rest of his game to be able to drive in and attack defenses, which then is opening up his ability to play make and create for his teammates. He's had some great kick-out passes after a strong drive to the rim. So for Jae'Sean Tate, unfortunately, his reputation precedes him to where defenses do not honor him as a 3-point shooter. They sag completely off of him. And at times that does muck up the offense when he is on the floor. But if he can actually take advantage of those openings and actually start hitting some threes at a decent clip, and he's also still able to create some offense sometimes, right? Even Alp does it too, where the defense sags off and they're still able to drive the ball and enforce the issue with the defense and create opportunities that otherwise wouldn't be there for somebody else who might just have to settle for a 3-point shot. But I do 100% agree. I think Jae'Sean Tate is an invaluable part of this team, and him being out, this team misses him dearly on both sides of the floor, but especially the offensive side that you were just alluding to. Coming up, do want to talk about some of these split cut actions that the Rockets can run to open things up offensively for themselves. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your sports betting info and stats, news, analysis, everything you need this season. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. They've got you for basketball, football, soccer. They've even got you covered for esports. They've got it all over at BetOnline. Right now, you can head over to BetOnline to take a look at who the odds-on favorites are to go number 1 overall in this year's NBA draft. Victor Wembanyama, the overwhelming favorite at minus 1,000 odds to go number 1 overall. But here's the kicker. Scoot Henderson actually has less chance to go number 1 overall than the other option, right? So somebody not named Victor Wembanyama or Scoot Henderson is currently plus 825 via BetOnline. Scoot Henderson is plus 1,000 to be the number 1 overall pick. So there's a better chance via BetOnline that a sleeper jumps over Scoot Henderson to go number 1 overall than for actually Scoot to overtake Victor Wembanyama, which I think is kind of, it's a really interesting betting line. So for all those odds and more, be sure to check out betonline.net to learn about the trends in action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, we spent the better part of those first 2 segments kind of discussing a little bit of, Steven Silas's offensive philosophy, what he would like for this Rockets team to be able to achieve offensively. And I do think when we've seen it at its best, the drive and kick offense does work really well, right? Think to the Toronto game where we were incredibly impressed by Kevin Porter Jr., by Jalen Green, by the playmaking in that game, by all the drive and kick offense that was being initiated. Again, Kevin had 24 potential assists in that game to go with his 11 actual assists. So the opportunities were plentiful in that game for the Rockets offensively. There were a lot of great shots being generated. So at its peak, at its best, the drive and kick offense can look very, very good. Unfortunately, this is a young Rockets team. They're still learning and growing and trying to understand and adapt to the decision-making process and how to be the best version of themselves on a nightly basis. And they do fall back into bad habits at times, which is unfortunate. But Alykhan, let's run this action, or let's run this play, the split cut actions, which is, I'm assuming, less so a play and more just actions that can be run out of a designated set, right?
Yeah, so I'm calling it split cuts, but I'm going to be talking about kind of two different types of plays or kind of actions or like movements that the Rockets do, okay? And both of them involve something I would want the Rockets to do more of, and that's use Jabari Smith in that 5 role at the top of the key versus Alperen Sengun. And I'll give you my reasoning why. So as of right now, and we've talked about this the last 2 weeks in particular with LP, he's been that connector. When that transition play breaks down, the first 7 to 8 seconds of the shot clock are gone, and they can't get into any good plays or the mismatch is broken, give it to LP at the top of the key and run a dribble handoff and let him get a post-up mismatch, or let Jalen get going off of his dribble handoff and see what happens, right? That's kind of the go-to here. Now, what I would say is, we know that works if Jabari is struggling to get going and establish a rhythm, right? They want to use him in horns in that kind of elbow area to get him going as a passer or as a shooter from there. I'd argue, let's extend it a little bit out. Let's start at the 3-point line. Let's make him a passer and initiator from there. Put him in that same role that Alp's been doing, kind of interchange it a little bit and see what happens. There's one play that the Rockets ran, essentially where Alperen Sengun was coming up to set a screen. Okay. Now the screen, there's 2 ways to go about it. They can be a split cut screen, which is not really a screen. It's where basically 2 players kind of run into each other. One may be setting a down screen for the other, and they go in opposite directions. Okay. So, and then the other one is more of a delay action. What delay means is like you're coming to set the screen, then you set a screen at a specific angle. Like you turn your body and you set a screen at a specific angle. And in this case, Jalen Green would go around that screen and get the basketball from whoever was holding the ball. Meanwhile, the other player would pop out to the corner or cut inside. Now, those are 2 options from that. It just depends on the type of screen. That's why I'm not really saying it's split cuts or delay. But in this case, let's go with split cuts, right? 2 guys going in opposite directions. When Alperen Sengun sets the screen and he and Jalen kind of run into each other, Alp's going to go back down towards the post and kind of post up, versus Jalen's going to come around and go to the top of the key. Then he has Jabari there. Then him and Jabari can initiate a dribble handoff. And then Jabari can kind of pop out to the wing or the slot where he usually is. And then Jalen, because it allows him to get to the middle, which is where he's so good at, gets to the middle of the floor and allows him to be able to make a decision. Does he have a quick first step enough to be able to get a shot off? Or does he need to be able to make a pass because defenses are so centered in on him? And there's a few plays you want to go back in the Dallas game and watch, and I'll make it easier for you. It's Jalen Green's highlights on YouTube if you want to do that. End of the 3rd quarter, Jalen gets a quick screen, gets past the initial defender, and scores. This is not the play I'm describing, but the same rationale exists there, where when Jalen has a step ahead of his defender and he's in the middle of the floor, he is so lethal with the ball that he can score or he can pass that it puts the Rockets in a great situation to be successful. And so the purpose of me going over this is I want you to pay attention to, because it started happening in the Dallas game, and I think it's gonna be a trend moving forward with Steven Silas and his offense, is getting Jabari the ball in his hands so he just establishes a rhythm with the ball in his hands while also making him into a passer and a scorer. Allows Alpi to still be a screener and also for Alpi to still get a mismatch, right? Like split cuts with Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson, why does it work so well? Because when they're going in random directions, the defense is trying to hold them and kind of guide the switch, right? Same thing the Rockets used to do when they defend them, try to guide the switch. It allows you to kind of not, it doesn't give them the freedom to move to where they want to go. You're kind of dictating that. Well, with Alp and Jalen, if they're going in opposite directions, right? It allows Alp to maybe, okay, you're going to guard me. There's a smaller player guarding Jalen. Let me go in that smaller defender's direction so I can get the smaller defender on my back and post him up. And let me get Jalen, the bigger defender, on him. So then Jalen can go around and has a mismatch as well. So it's not only, it doesn't have to necessarily be a dribble handoff with Jabari. It could just be an action that opens up a mismatch and allows you to post up or get Jalen the ball against a longer big. And so all in all, it's a great action. The Rockets have run it a few times this season. I saw it more in the Dallas game, but more importantly, what I want to point out, Jabari having the ball at the top of the key as a decision maker, it's going to help him establish a rhythm. And I really do think it's going to help him get going and be able to improve his percentage from three.
There's definitely probably way too many times throughout this season where Jabari just doesn't touch the basketball for long stretches of the game. And that's hard to expect anybody to do. I remember that used to be a big criticism of the James Harden era Rockets. Is it's just, James dominated the ball so much of the game that shout out to those role players, right? The Trevor Arizas, the PJ Tuckers, who were able to stay in rhythm, and their entire role in the court was essentially just play hard defense and then be ready to catch and shoot offensively, because that was all the Rockets offense boiled down to. There was very little responsibility for the other role players in that offense to touch the ball, to drive, to make moves. It was very much predicated on let James do his thing, and you've got to be ready to catch and shoot. And I think it's really tough to have that same expectation out of a rookie in Jabari, somebody who was accustomed to, being a large part, being the focal point of the Auburn offense, even though it was in a different way. He got the ball in different spots on the floor, but he was very involved, consistently in that offense. And now he's been kind of downgraded to a spot up shooter, which matches his skill set for the NBA. It's not like he's a guy who can put the ball on the deck and just, create, break down a defender off a dribble, whatever. But at the same time, you still need touches, right? You still need to touch the basketball to get a feel, to be in the rhythm, and to feel like you're a part of the offense rather than just being tucked away in the corner. And maybe the ball gets kicked out to you, maybe not. But going through, 2, 3, 4, 5 offensive possessions where he just doesn't ever touch the ball at all is probably not the best thing for his growth and for his development. I 100% agree with you there.
I do want to make one more point here before we wrap up. Just another tidbit I couldn't talk about on today's show that I want our listeners to pay attention to. So just something to kind of watch when you're watching the next few Rockets games before we meet again. I feel like Jalen Green needs to have the ball in his hands more in transition. Now, KPJ's gotten better. He has those flashes, right, where he looks so good bringing the ball up, getting the offense, getting them going quickly and going from there as a passer. But I really feel like Jalen's really improved. I mean, he's averaging 6+ assists in the last 4 games. Get him the ball early. I'll tell you, in Dallas, 1.286 points per possession when Jalen Green pushed the ball in transition. Get him the ball. He knows what he's doing. He's quick with it. He'll make mistakes. He made a couple turnovers in that game. Some his fault, some not his fault in transition. But overall, he knows what he's doing. He knows where he wants to go, and he gets screens. The key with him is players know he wants a screen. So when he gets the screen, he's looking to attack downhill. And if he's attacking downhill, he wants to go up or he wants to make a pass. And defenses are going to have a harder time keying in on him when they're not set, right? And that's when you attack fast. So that's why I'm saying I think especially when they're staggering and they're playing in a second unit, you'll pay attention to this. In that lineup that we all love, right? The KJ Martin, Usman Garuba, Tari Eason lineup.
Goon Squad.
I want you guys to pay attention when Jalen is playing with them and how great the offense looks when he's out there with those 3. It's because they're attacking quick in transition and they're trying to get easy points. And he's been their captain during those stints.
Could not agree more. That lineup is probably that lineup. And shout out to Dacian Nix as well, who's been a part of those lineups.
And he's been a combo guard.
Moments.
He's been a combo guard with Jalen, and he's done a great job of that because Dacian is knocking down his threes, which you have to love.
Yep. Absolutely. That lineup over these last, handful of games that we've seen that lineup being deployed has been a really, really fun 5-man lineup for the Rockets. And it's going to be interesting to see how they kind of continue to grow and develop with one another, especially with Jalen, continuing to flash this playmaking prowess. Seeing him continue to grow as a playmaker for sure is a really important part of his development. It's been a really fun kind of storyline to follow over these last 3 or 4 games or so as he's averaging those 6+ assists that you mentioned, Alykhan. But that's going to do it for today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed the breakdowns. This felt like a good one, Alykhan, if I do say so myself, not to pat myself on the back here or pat us on the back here, but it felt like a good episode. I really like some of the stuff that we talked about, but you know the drill, Alykhan. Let everyone know where to track you down at while it still exists.
I'm not going to give Twitter today.
Oh, you're not? Oh, wow. I feel awkward having the @Rockets Insider under your name then.
Oh, I look. If I don't think Twitter is going to go down personally, but if it does and something happens, you will find me on Locked On Rockets with Jackson. You can hear my takes here. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'll probably post more stuff there. It's my full name, Alykhan Bijani NBA. Or you can follow me on Rockets Film Room. Ideally, I would want you to follow and subscribe to this channel because we will have a lot of great stuff for you over the course of the season. And I will tell you, Jackson, I will have you covered with film stuff moving forward. So please make sure you're subscribing to the YouTube channel.
That's going to do it for today's show. As always, appreciate you for checking out the program. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available wherever you listen to your podcast. We're also available on YouTube. Just go to YouTube, search Locked on Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. How do you feel about the Rockets offense after today's show? Do you feel a little bit more confident in it like I do, or are you still kind of skeptical at best about what the Rockets are trying to do? Let me know in the YouTube comments. I do read each and every one of those every single day. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back right here at Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.